Did you know an army of women fought a secret war within the Second World War? They weren't in uniform, they didn't carry rifles on the front lines. They were spies. They operated in the shadows of occupied territories, armed with radios, forged papers, and immense courage. The Special Operations Executive, a British organization, sent around 50 women into enemy-held France. Only a handful came back. Many of their stories were classified for decades, buried in dusty government files. Why were their contributions overlooked for so long? What turns a shop girl, a writer, or a housewife into a saboteur and secret agent? These women were trained to kill, to lie, to withstand interrogation. They organized resistance networks, blew up supply lines, and transmitted vital intelligence. But their war was personal, fought in whispers and back alleys. And for many, their final moments remain a mystery. Who were these forgotten women, and what secrets did they take to their graves? Number 17 was a princess, the perfect spy. Her name was Noor Inayat Khan. She was a princess, a descendant of Indian royalty. She was also a Sufi, a believer in nonviolence. And she wrote children's books. This doesn't sound like the resume of a secret agent, but that's exactly what she became. The Special Operations Executive, or SOE, saw something else in her. They saw a quiet determination. They saw a fluent French speaker who could blend in. They needed radio operators in Paris, and they were desperate. The job was one of the most dangerous. The average life expectancy of a radio operator in the field was just 6 weeks. German direction, finding vans, roamed the streets, constantly hunting for their signals. Noor, codenamed Madeleine, was sent to Paris in June 1943. Her radio network, called Prosper, was collapsing. The Gestapo, the regime's secret police, were arresting agents left and right. Within days of her arrival, the entire network was compromised. Everyone was being rounded up. Her superiors in London ordered her to return home immediately. She refused. She was the last radio operator left in Paris. She knew the remaining British agents and French resistance fighters depended on her. For months, she was a ghost. She moved from one safe house to another, lugging a heavy suitcase that contained her transmitter. She changed her appearance, dyeing her hair, constantly looking over her shoulder. She did the work of 6 operators, transmitting messages back to London that were crucial for planning future operations. The writer Lise de Baissac, in her book Spy Princess: The Life of Noor Inayat Khan, documents Noor's incredible bravery. Baissac uncovered diaries and letters that painted a picture of a woman driven by a deep sense of duty, not a thirst for adventure. Noor knew the risks. She saw her friends and colleagues disappear, yet she stayed. But her luck ran out. In October 1943, she was betrayed. The details of the betrayal are still debated. Some sources point to Renee Gary, the sister of her network's leader, who may have sold the information for money. Noor was taken to the Gestapo headquarters at 84 Avenue Foch in Paris. She fought back fiercely, refusing to be taken quietly. She made 2 escape attempts from her cell. She refused to give up any information, despite repeated interrogations. Her captors were so impressed by her resistance, they labeled her highly dangerous. She never signed a document that would have renounced her actions in exchange for better treatment. Eventually, she was sent to a German prison, and then, in September 1944, to the Dachau concentration camp. There, she was executed with a single shot to the back of the head. Her last word, according to eyewitnesses, was "Liberte." We know the outline of her story, we know her courage, but so much remains in the dark. What were the exact contents of the messages she sent during those lonely months in Paris? Did her controllers in London fully understand the danger she was in, or was she seen as a necessary sacrifice? And who was the true source of the betrayal that led to her capture, a mystery that still haunts intelligence historians? Number 16. Could a socialite outsmart her captors? Some people are born for the shadows. Krystyna Skarbek was one of them. She was a Polish countess, a beauty queen, and a socialite before the war. When German forces invaded her home country in 1939, she was in Africa. She immediately went to the British embassy and demanded to help. They were skeptical at first, but her confidence and her connections were impossible to ignore. She became one of Britain's first and longest-serving female agents. Her codename was Christine Grenville. Her early missions were legendary. She skied over the treacherous Tatra Mountains, a journey of minus 30 degrees Celsius, to get from Hungary into occupied Poland. She was a courier, smuggling intelligence, propaganda, and funds to the Polish resistance. She was captured several times, but always managed to talk her way out. On one occasion, she and her Polish partner were arrested by the Gestapo. During the interrogation, she bit her own tongue so hard it bled, then pretended to be coughing up blood from tuberculosis. Her captors, terrified of the disease, released them both. This story is recounted in Claire Mully's biography, The Spy Who Loved. Mully shows a woman who used her wits, and what others perceived as female weakness to her advantage. Her most famous exploit came in 1944. She was working in southern France with the SOE. Two of her male colleagues, including her close friend Francis Kammertz, the leader of a major resistance network, were captured by the local German garrison. They were scheduled for execution. A military rescue was impossible, so Krystyna walked into the garrison headquarters alone. She confronted the commander, a man named Schenk. She told him she was a British agent and the niece of General Montgomery. This was a lie. She told him the Allies were advancing rapidly and that he would be handed over for war crimes if he executed the prisoners. But she offered if he released them, she would guarantee his safety. She bribed him with 2 million francs that had been parachuted in for the resistance. It was an incredible bluff. He believed her. The prisoners were released just hours before they were meant to be shot. Krystyna Skarbek survived the war. She was awarded the George Medal and the OBE for her service, but peace was not kind to her. The country she fought for, Britain, seemed to have no place for her. She struggled to find work, taking jobs as a cleaner and a cruise ship stewardess. Her life ended tragically in 1952 when she was murdered in a London hotel by a jealous stalker she had rejected. A woman who faced down the secret police of an entire empire was killed in a moment of domestic violence. Her life was one of cinematic bravery, but questions linger. How many people did she save during her missions in Poland? Missions for which few official records exist. What was the full extent of her intelligence network in Eastern Europe? And why did the British government, a government she served with such distinction, seem to abandon her so completely after the war was won? Number 15. Did a housewife from New Jersey become a master of disguise? Virginia Hall didn't fit the mold. She was an American, a woman, and she had a disability. She had lost the lower part of her left leg in a hunting accident years before. She wore a wooden prosthetic she nicknamed Cuthbert. She had tried to join the U.S. Foreign Service, but they rejected her because of her leg and her gender. They told her she could never be a diplomat, so she found another way to serve. When war broke out in Europe, she was in France. She drove an ambulance until the country fell to the occupying forces. Then she made her way to London. There, the SOE didn't see a disabled woman. They saw an opportunity. They saw someone with fluent French, unbreakable will, and a burning desire to fight. In August 1941, she became the first female SOE agent to be sent into France. Her cover was as a reporter for the New York Post. This allowed her to travel and ask questions without raising too much suspicion. Her mission was to help build the resistance in the Vichy-controlled part of France. She was a natural organizer. She found safe houses, recruited agents, and coordinated parachute drops of weapons and supplies. She was a master of disguise, changing her appearance by dressing as a milkmaid or an elderly woman, altering her walk to hide her limp. She was so effective that the German secret police put her on their most wanted list. They called her the Limping Lady. The posters said she was the most dangerous of all Allied spies. She worked in France for over a year. But as the German grip tightened, it became too dangerous. She had to escape. In the winter of 1942, she walked across the Pyrenees Mountains into Spain. It was a brutal 50-mile journey through snow and ice. Her prosthetic leg caused her agonizing pain. At one point, she sent a radio message to London saying she hoped Cuthbert wouldn't be a problem. Her handlers, not knowing her nickname for her leg, replied, "If Cuthbert giving you trouble, have him eliminated." But Virginia Hall wasn't done. She joined the American equivalent of the SOE, the Office of Strategic Services, OSS. They sent her back into occupied France in 1944. This time, disguised as an elderly farm woman, she organized and armed several battalions of French resistance fighters. They waged like a guerrilla war, sabotaging bridges, derailing trains, and attacking German convoys. Her forces were credited with killing over 150 enemy soldiers and capturing 500 more. Her story is detailed in Sonia Purnell's bestseller, A Woman of No Importance. Purnell argues that Hall's ability to be underestimated was her greatest weapon. Virginia Hall survived the war and became the only civilian woman to receive the Distinguished Service Cross. She later worked for the CIA. Yet for decades, her story was largely unknown. We know about her major achievements. But what about the day-to-day reality? How many close calls did she have that were never reported? Who were the everyday French citizens, the farmers and shopkeepers who risked their own lives to hide her? And how did she really cope with the constant pain from her prosthetic leg while operating deep in enemy territory? Number 14, what made a young mother leave her child for war? Violette Szabo was a shop assistant at a department store in Brixton, London. She was sharp, vibrant, and tough. She met and married a French army officer, Etienne Szabo. They had a daughter, Tanya. Their life together was short. Etienne was killed in action in North Africa in 1942. His death changed everything for Violette. She wanted revenge. She wanted to fight for the world her husband had believed in. The SOE found her. She was a dual citizen, fluent in French, and she was a crack shot. She had learned to shoot on a farm as a girl. Her training was intense. Trainees were taught to handle explosives, practice silent killing, and master Morse code. They learned to kill a man with their bare hands. Many didn't make it through the course. Violette did. Her first mission to France in the spring of 1944 was a success. She was sent to evaluate the state of a resistance network that had been shattered by arrests. She traveled around the region, gathering intelligence and rebuilding contacts. She reported back that the network was salvageable. Then she returned to England. She could have stopped there. She had a young daughter waiting for her, but she volunteered to go back. Her second mission in June 1944, just after the D-Day landings, was to coordinate the local resistance in the Limoges area, to sabotage communication lines and hamper the movement of German troops towards the Normandy beaches. It was incredibly dangerous work. Soon after she arrived, she was traveling by car with a local resistance leader when they ran into a German patrol. A firefight erupted. Violette provided cover fire with her Sten gun, firing at the soldiers while her companion escaped. She held them off for half an hour until her ammunition ran out. Then she was captured, she was interrogated and tortured, but she revealed nothing. She was moved through a series of prisons. Her daughter, Tania Szabo, later wrote a book about her mother called Young, Brave, and Beautiful, piecing together the final months of her life from survivor testimonies. Violette was eventually sent to the Ravensbrück concentration camp for women. There, with two other female SOE agents, Denise Bloch and Lilian Rolf, she was executed in early 1945. She was 23 years old. For her bravery, she was posthumously awarded the George Cross, the highest civilian honor, for gallantry. Her story is a testament to incredible courage, but the gaps in our knowledge are haunting. What were her thoughts as she decided to leave her daughter for that second fatal mission? What specific acts of torture did she endure at the hands of her interrogators on Avenue Foch? And what were the final conversations between her and the other two agents as they faced their execution at Ravensbrück? Number 13. How did a quiet girl become a sabotage expert? Lise de Baissac was not an obvious choice. She was small, quiet, and came from a respectable family in Mauritius. But like many others, the SOE saw beneath the surface. They saw a woman who spoke perfect French and English, who was intelligent and self-reliant. They recruited her and her brother Claude. At the same time, she was one of the very first female SOE agents to be parachuted into France, arriving in September 1942. Her mission was to set up a new resistance circuit in Poitiers and act as a liaison for other agents. Her cover story was that she was a poor widow from Paris looking for a quiet place to live. She rented a small apartment and began her work. She was meticulous. She found landing grounds for Allied planes, hiding places for agents, and drop zones for supplies. She cycled hundreds of kilometers, acting as a courier, carrying messages, weapons, and money. She lived in constant fear of the milice, the French paramilitary force that worked with the occupying authorities. Lise de Baissac was a pioneer. In his book, The Women Who Lived for Danger, author Marcus Binney highlights how agents like Lise had to invent their own methods, as there was no established playbook for what they were doing. She had to learn on the job, where a single mistake could be fatal. After nearly a year, she was recalled to England. But like Violette Szabo, she volunteered to go back. She returned to France in 1944 with another female agent, André Borel. This time, her mission was different. She was sent to Normandy to work with her brother's resistance network. Her role was to train and arm local fighters, preparing them to disrupt German communications and transport when the Allied invasion began. She became an expert in explosives. She taught young French men and women how to blow up railway lines and bridges. She was known for her calmness under pressure. She survived the war. She married and lived a quiet life, rarely speaking of her experiences. She was one of the few who made it through from the beginning to the end. Her story is less tragic than some, but no less remarkable. She operated for longer than almost any other female agent in France, but her quiet life afterwards leaves us with questions. How did she mentally transition from being a saboteur and spy to a wife and mother in peacetime? Like what were the specific sabotage operations she led that were never officially documented? And what was the emotional toll of seeing so many of her friends and colleagues like Andre Burrell captured and killed while she managed to survive? And number 12, did a Hollywood star's invention change the war? This story is different. It's not about parachutes and secret radios. It's about a mind. Hedy Lamarr was one of the biggest movie stars in the world in the 1930s and 40s. She was known for her stunning beauty, but behind the Hollywood glamour was a brilliant inventor. She was born Hedwig Kiesler in Austria. Her first husband was an Austrian arms dealer who supplied weapons to the German and Italian governments. Well, she was essentially a prisoner in her own home, forced to host dinners for high-ranking officials of the regime. But she listened. She learned about military technology, about things like radio-controlled torpedoes. She eventually escaped her husband and fled to Hollywood. As the war in Europe intensified, she wanted to help the Allied cause. She knew that radio-controlled torpedoes were a powerful weapon, but they were easy to jam. If the enemy could find the frequency being used to guide the torpedo, they could block it, sending it off course. And Hedy had an idea. What if you could make the radio signal jump from frequency to frequency randomly and rapidly? The enemy would never be able to find and jam the signal. She worked on the idea with a friend, the composer George Antheil. They figured out how to synchronize the frequency hopping using a mechanism based on player piano rolls. They patented their secret communication system in 1942 and gave the patent to the U.S. Navy. The Navy, however, was not impressed. They saw a movie star and a composer, not serious inventors. The technology was complex, and they dismissed the idea. They told Hedy she could better serve the war effort by using her fame to sell war bonds, and she did. She raised millions of dollars. But her invention, the one that could have saved countless lives, sat on a shelf. The story is explored in the documentary Bombshell, the Hedy Lamarr story, which reveals the frustration she felt at not being taken seriously. The military finally started using her frequency hopping technology in the 1960s during the Cuban Missile Crisis. It was too late for the Second World War, but the core concept she developed is now the foundation for much of our modern wireless technology. It's used in Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and GPS. Every time you use your smartphone, you're using a piece of Hedy Lamarr's idea. She was never paid a cent for it. She received some belated recognition for her work late in her life, but for decades her contribution was completely forgotten, overshadowed by her movie career. This raises some troubling questions. How many other brilliant ideas from unconventional sources were dismissed by the military bureaucracy during the war? If her technology had been implemented in 1942, how might it have changed the course of the war at sea? And how much faster could technology have advanced if women like Hedy Lamarr had been seen as intellectuals and inventors instead of just pretty faces? Number 11. Could an entertainer's fame be the ultimate cover? Josephine Baker was a superstar. She was an American-born singer and dancer who had taken Paris by storm in the 1920s. She was one of the most famous and wealthy women in Europe. When the war came, she could have easily gone back to the safety of the United States. She chose to stay. She loved France, her adopted country, and she despised the racist ideology of the occupying regime. She decided to fight. Her fame was her greatest weapon. She was recruited into French military intelligence. Her job was to gather information. As a famous entertainer, she could travel more freely than most. She attended parties at embassies, charming diplomats, and high-ranking officials. She would listen to conversations, gathering snippets of information about troop movements and political plans. No one suspected the glamour star was a spy. In his book, Josephine the Hungry Heart, Jean-Claude Baker, her adopted son, describes how she would write down what she learned in invisible ink on her sheet music. When she traveled, she carried sensitive documents and reports for the French resistance. She pinned them to her underwear, correctly assuming that her celebrity status would prevent her from being strip-searched by border guards. She smuggled the Jewish actor Jean Gabin and his family out of France. She used her home, a French chateau, as a safe house for resistance fighters. Later in the war, she moved to North Africa, where she continued her intelligence work and performed for Allied troops. She donated her immense wealth to the cause. She refused to perform for segregated audiences, a principle she maintained throughout her life. After the war, she was awarded the Croix de Guerre and the Legion of Honor by the French government, their highest military honors. But outside of France, her wartime activities remained largely unknown for many years. People remembered the dancer in the banana skirt, not the spy who risked her life for her country. Her story is unique, a perfect blend of glamour and grit. But what specific intelligence did she gather at those high society parties that directly impacted Allied strategy? How many people did she personally help smuggle to safety, a number that was likely never officially recorded? And did any of the officials she spied on ever realize, after the war, that they had been fooled by the world's most famous entertainer? Number 10. How do you lead an army without a title? Pearl Witherington didn't set out to be a commander. She started her SOE career as a courier, one of the 3 W's, that women were supposedly suited for wireless, weapons, or welfare. She was parachuted into France in 1943. Her code name was Pauline. She worked for a large resistance network, cycling thousands of miles to deliver messages and money. And she was efficient and brave. But then her leader was captured. The network was in chaos. Someone had to take charge. That someone was Pearl. She stepped up. She reorganized the scattered resistance groups. She became the leader of a network of over 1,500 French resistance fighters known as Maquis. She trained them, armed them with weapons from Allied airdrops, and led them in guerrilla warfare. Under her command, her forces fought a pitched battle against 2,000 German soldiers, holding them off for 14 hours and forcing their retreat. They sabotaged a crucial railway line over 800 times, seriously disrupting the movement of troops and supplies. They were a thorn in the side of the occupying army. The author and historian Patrick K. O'Donnell has documented the critical role of such networks in his work on the OSS, showing that these local sabotage efforts were not minor acts but essential components of the larger Allied strategy. Pearl was a commander in all but name. When the war was over, she was recommended for the Military Cross for her leadership. The request was denied. She was told that, as a woman, she was not eligible for a combat award. They offered her a civilian honor instead. She was furious. She sent back a letter that read, "I see that you are proposing to award me an MBE Civil. I am a little surprised that this should be a civil award, as I am sure that my work was of a military nature. I did not sit in an office, but I was in the field with the men, sharing their dangers and their work." She rejected the civilian medal. Decades later, the British government finally acknowledged her role, and she was awarded her parachute wings in 2004 and made a Commander of the Order of the British Empire. Her story challenges the traditional narrative of war, but there are still gaps. What were the personal dynamics like? A young English woman commanding a group of seasoned French male fighters. How did she earn their respect and loyalty in a deeply patriarchal society? And how many other women performed similar command roles in the field but were never recognized at all? Their stories lost because they didn't fit the official categories for military honors. Number 9. What happens when a spy's network vanishes? Andrée Borel was a fighter long before the SOE found her. She was a young woman from Paris who joined an early French resistance network, helping Allied airmen shot down over France escape to safety. When that network was betrayed, she herself had to escape, making the perilous journey over the Pyrenees to Spain. In London, her experience and her courage made her a perfect candidate for the SOE. She was trained and sent back into the country she had just fled. In September 1942, she became the first female SOE agent to be parachuted into occupied France, but the drop went wrong. She landed far from her target in a field near a German-occupied airfield. She had to bury her equipment and make her way on foot, alone and in danger. She eventually connected with her assigned network, where she worked as a courier. She was known for her fearlessness and her deep knowledge of the Parisian underground. She was a key part of one of the largest and most important SOE networks in France. But in the summer of 1943, that network, known as Prosper, collapsed catastrophically. The German secret police, through a combination of captured radio sets and informants, managed to dismantle the entire organization. Dozens of agents were arrested in a very short period. Andrée Borel was one of them. She was captured in June 1943. She was taken to the Gestapo headquarters in Paris and interrogated. Like the others, she revealed nothing. Her final journey was to the Natzweiler-Struthof concentration camp in the mountains of Alsace. It was one of the most brutal camps in the system. There, in July 1944, she and three other female SOE agents, Vera Lee, Sonia Olshanesky, and Diana Rodin, were executed by lethal injection. For years, the official story was that they had been shot. The horrific truth was only uncovered later through war crimes trial testimonies. The book A Life in Secrets by Sarah Helm meticulously reconstructs the final days of these women, using camp records and survivor accounts to challenge the sanitized versions of their deaths. The story of Andre Borel is one of bravery betrayed, but the central mystery remains. Why did the Prosper network collapse so quickly and so completely? Was it simply good German police work, or was there a high-level double agent inside the SOE in London, as some have long suspected? What really happened during her year of imprisonment, and did she and the other three women know what was about to happen to them in their final moments at Natzweiler? Number 8. Was she betrayed by a lover? Odette Sansom was a French housewife living in England with her 3 young daughters. She heard a radio appeal for photographs of the French coast to help with military planning. She sent them in, but she mistakenly sent them to the wrong government department. They ended up on the desk of the SOE. They were looking for French speakers. They contacted her. The thought of leaving her children was agonizing, but the desire to fight for her home country was stronger. She agreed to become an agent. She was sent to France in 1942, where she joined a network led by Captain Peter Churchill. Her code name was Lise's. She worked as a courier. She and Churchill also fell in love while working together in the field. They operated for a year, but the net was closing in. In April 1943, they were betrayed and arrested by the Gestapo. Thinking quickly, Odette came up with a story. She told their captors that Peter Churchill was the nephew of the British Prime Minister and that she was his wife. She insisted that he knew nothing of her activities. She had only come to France to be with him. This was a lie, but it was a brilliant one. It made them valuable prisoners, ones to be kept alive for a potential exchange, rather than spies to be executed immediately. She was sent to the Fresnes prison in Paris, where she was brutally tortured by the secret police. Her back was broken and all of her toenails were pulled out. She stuck to her story. She revealed nothing about her network or her colleagues. She was condemned to death and sent to the Ravensbrück concentration camp. She spent the rest of the war there, much of it in solitary confinement and darkness. She was starved and beaten. But she survived. As the war was ending, the camp's commandant, Fritz Suren, fearing for his own life, drove her towards the advancing Allied lines, hoping to use his valuable prisoner as a bargaining chip. You know, it didn't work for him, but it saved Odette's life. And her story of survival is incredible. The book she co-wrote, Odette, brought her story to a wide audience. She became a symbol of resilience, but the identity of the person who betrayed her and Peter Churchill has never been definitively proven. Was it a fellow agent who broke under interrogation? Was it a local informant? Or was it, as some have whispered, a rival within the resistance? And what gave her the mental and physical strength to endure torture and 2 years in a concentration camp when so many others perished? Number 7. How did the White Mouse become the Gestapo's most wanted? Nancy Wake was a force of nature. She was an Australian journalist living in Marseille, France, with her wealthy French husband, Henri Fiocca. When the war started, she didn't hesitate. She became an ambulance driver. After France fell, she immediately joined the resistance. She used her wealth and social connections to help create an escape line, smuggling Allied soldiers and Jewish refugees out of France over the mountains to Spain. She was so good at evading capture, the Gestapo nicknamed her the White Mouse. They put a 5 million franc bounty on her head. By 1943, it was too dangerous for her to stay. Her network had been betrayed. She escaped to Britain, but her husband was captured, tortured, and executed for refusing to reveal her whereabouts. She never saw him again. In London, she immediately joined the SOE. She wanted to go back. She wanted to fight. She trained as a saboteur and organizer. In April 1944, she was parachuted back into France. Her mission was to prepare the local Maquis for the D-Day landings. She became the leader of 7,000 resistance fighters. She was a fearsome commander. She led her troops in raids against German installations and convoys. In one instance, she cycled 500 kilometers through enemy territory to find a replacement radio and operator after hers was destroyed. In another, she killed a sentry with her bare hands using a silent killing technique she learned in training. Her story, as told in her autobiography, The White Mouse, is filled with such moments of raw courage and action. She was not a subtle spy. She was a warrior. After the war, she was one of the most decorated servicewomen of the war, receiving medals from Britain, France, Australia, and the United States. She lived a long life, passing away in 2011. Her exploits are legendary, but even in her well-documented life, there are unknowns. Who was the informant who betrayed her first escape network and led to her husband's death? What were the names and stories of the thousands of French fighters who served under her command? And how did she personally reconcile her public image as a hero with the private grief of losing her husband and the brutal reality of the violence she had to commit to survive and win? Number 6, what secrets did the spy mistress keep? Vera Atkins was not a field agent. She never parachuted into France or blew up a train, but she was one of the most important and enigmatic figures in the SOE. She was the intelligence officer for F Section, the branch responsible for operations in France. She was, in effect, the spy mistress. She recruited, trained, and briefed many of the female agents. She was the one who sent them on their missions. She was their main point of contact in London, the person they reported to. And for many, she was the last friendly face they saw before they left. She was born Vera Rosenberg in Romania to a Jewish family. She was fiercely intelligent, multilingual, and intensely private. She cultivated an air of mystery. After the war, when F Section was disbanded, she made it her personal mission to find out what happened to the 118 of her agents who were missing. The official government channels were slow and bureaucratic. Vera went to Germany herself. She traveled through the ruins of the former regime, interrogating captured German officials, visiting the sites of concentration camps, and tracking down witnesses. It was a grim, thankless task. She meticulously documented the fate of every one of her missing agents, including the 13 women who had perished. Sarah Helm's book, A Life in Secrets, is largely based on the search for answers about Vera Atkins herself, a woman who knew everyone's secrets but revealed so few of her own. Thanks to her work, we know the final fates of women like Noor Inayat Khan and Violette Szabo. She provided closure for their families and ensured their sacrifice was not forgotten. But Vera Atkins herself remains a puzzle. She was a key figure in a major intelligence organization, yet she was technically a foreign national with a complex background. Rumors have swirled for years. Was she a double agent, as some have claimed, responsible for the collapse of the Prosper network? Most historians now dismiss this, but the accusation has lingered. Why did she destroy so many of her personal records after the war? What did she know about the potential compromises within the SOE that she never revealed? Vera Atkins dedicated her life to finding the truth for others, but she took many of her own truths to the grave. Number 5. Could a teenager lead a resistance cell? Eliane Plumin was born in Marseille, but grew up in England. She was working for a company in Leicester when the war broke out. She was young, bilingual, and wanted to do her part. The SOE recruited her for her language skills and her steady demeanor. After intensive training, she was parachuted into France in August 1943. Her code name was Gabi. She was just 25 years old. Her mission was to work as a courier for a network in the Marseille region. This was dangerous, essential work. She was the link between the organizer, the explosives expert, and the radio operator. She traveled constantly, carrying messages, weapons, plans, and money. She helped arrange parachute drops of supplies and scouted locations for sabotage operations. She was instrumental in a series of successful operations that destroyed locomotives and industrial machinery vital to the German war effort. She was not just a messenger, she was a core part of the operational team, but the networks were always vulnerable. Betrayal was a constant threat. In early 1944, her entire circuit was compromised and its leaders were arrested. Eliane was captured along with them. She was interrogated and then deported to Germany. Her final destination was the Dachau concentration camp. There, in September 1944, she was executed along with 3 other captured women, including the princess spy Noor Inayat Khan. The details of their deaths, like so many others, were pieced together after the war from the testimony of a few survivors. Records from the F section of the SOE show the high attrition rate for couriers, whose constant travel made them exceptionally vulnerable to spot checks and informants. Eliane Plumin's service was short, but impactful. Her story, like that of many couriers, is less documented than that of the high-profile organizers. So, we are left with questions. What were the specific sabotage missions she helped plan during her 7 months in the field? Who was the source of the betrayal that brought down her entire network so suddenly? And what were her experiences during her months of imprisonment before she was sent to Dachau? Number 4. Why was her story hidden for so long? Cecile Pearl Witherington, who we met earlier as a commander, had another agent in her network whose story is just as compelling but far less known. Her name was Madeleine Damerment. She had been involved in the French resistance from the very beginning, working for an escape line in northern France. When that line was betrayed, she was arrested. She managed to talk her way out of it and escaped to Britain. Like Nancy Wake and Andre Borel, she was a veteran of the resistance before she ever joined the SOE. The SOE recognized her experience and courage. They trained her and sent her back. In February 1944, she was parachuted into France. But the mission went wrong from the moment she landed. The reception committee waiting for her on the ground had already been captured, and the Germans were waiting. She was arrested immediately upon landing, before her mission had even begun. She was captured along with the radio operator France Antelmi and the courier Lionel Lee. She was taken to Gestapo headquarters in Paris and held in Fresnes prison. She was interrogated for months. There is no record that she ever gave anything away. In May 1944, she was shipped to a civilian prison in Germany. Then, in September of that year, she was transferred to the Dachau concentration camp. On September 13, 1944, just a day after Noor Inayat Khan and Eliane Plumin were executed there, Madeleine Damerment was led from her cell and shot. She was 26 years old. Her story is one of terrible luck and immense bravery. She had no chance to complete her mission, no opportunity to organize or fight. Her war was fought in an interrogation room and a prison cell. Because she was captured so quickly, her operational file is thin. Historians like Rita Kramer in her book Flames in the Field have worked to piece together the stories of women like Madeleine whose contributions were cut short. This leaves us with haunting questions. What was the exact nature of the intelligence failure that led to the Germans knowing the precise time and location of her parachute drop? What did she endure during her months of interrogation at Avenue Foch? And did she ever manage to get a message to the outside world, a message that has been lost to history? Number 3, did her radio transmissions change D-Day? Lillian Rolfe was the daughter of a British accountant growing up in Paris. She was working for the British embassy there when the country was invaded. She escaped with her family to England. Like so many other bilingual young women, she was a prime candidate for the SOE. She was quiet and conscientious, and she proved to be an excellent radio operator. After her training, she was dropped into the area around the city of Orleans in April 1944. Her codename was Nadine. Her mission was vital. It was the period just before the D-Day landings. The Allies needed precise intelligence from inside France, and Liliane's job was to work with the local Maquis, transmitting their reports on German troop movements, defenses, and sabotage results back to London. She was a crucial link in the intelligence chain. Her work was incredibly stressful. She had to constantly move her radio set to avoid detection by German direction finding teams. She transmitted dozens of important messages. Her information helped Allied bombers select their targets and gave planners a clearer picture of the situation on the ground. She continued her work through the summer of 1944, a period of intense fighting between the Maquis and German forces. But in late July, she was discovered. She was arrested and held in Fresnes prison. In August, as Allied forces were advancing on Paris, she was deported to Germany. She was sent to the Ravensbrück concentration camp. There, in the winter of 1945, she was taken to the execution block with 2 other agents we have met, Violette Szabo and Denise Bloch. They were shot. Lillian Rolfe was just 30 years old. Her contribution was critical at a decisive moment in the war. But the specifics are buried in classified files. Which of her radio messages had the most significant impact on the Normandy campaign? Did her intelligence lead directly to a specific, successful military operation? And what was life like for her during her final months in Ravensbrück, a place from which so few testimonies have survived? Number 2, who was the woman in the shadows of every mission? Denise Bloch came from a Jewish family in Paris. With her 3 brothers, she joined the French resistance early in the war. They worked with an SOE network until it was destroyed, the family was betrayed, and they had to go on the run. Denise made her way to Lyon, where she worked for another resistance group. When that one also collapsed, she was smuggled out of France to London. She had already seen the inside of the war, the betrayals and the arrests. More than most trainees, the SOE valued her experience. They trained her as a radio operator. In early 1944, she was sent back to France on a special mission with a man named Robert Benoist, a famous Grand Prix racing driver who is now a top SOE agent. They were a sabotage team. Their job was to destroy German targets in the countryside southwest of Paris. So Denise was the radio operator, but she was also an active saboteur. She was tough and capable, but their network was infiltrated by an informant. In June 1944, they were both captured. Denise was interrogated and tortured. She was held in prisons in France and Germany. She was shuttled between various camps. Her final destination was Ravensbrück. There, in the same group as Violette Szabo and Lillian Rolfe, she was executed in the early days of 1945. The war was just weeks from being over. Her story is one of relentless commitment. She joined, saw her network collapse, escaped, and then volunteered to go back into the very heart of the danger. She fought the war on the ground in France, long before she was officially an agent. According to the files of the British National Archives, agents with prior field experience like Denise were invaluable, but also at higher risk, as their faces might be known to informants. This leaves us with profound questions. Who were the members of her original family resistance cell, and what happened to her 3 brothers? What specific acts of sabotage did she and Robert Benoist carry out before their capture? And who was the informant who infiltrated their network and sent them to their deaths? Number 1. What is the true meaning of survival? We end where we began, with Virginia Hall. Her story is different because she survived. She made it through the war, a decorated hero who outsmarted the most ruthless secret police force in Europe. Her leg Cuthbert, which the American Foreign Service saw as a disqualification, became part of her legend. The limping lady was a ghost the Gestapo could never catch. After the war, she went on to work for the newly formed Central Intelligence Agency. She became an analyst, a desk officer. She married a fellow OSS agent she had worked with in France. She lived a quiet life in the Maryland countryside. But was it a quiet life? The historian and author Vincent Nuziel, in his works on French intelligence, has noted the profound psychological toll the war took on agents, something rarely discussed in the heroic narratives. Virginia Hall had seen friends captured and killed. She had lived with constant fear. She had been hunted. She carried the weight of the secrets she kept and the lives that were lost. Her survival was not an end to her war, but a transformation of it. She traded the fields of France for the corridors of Langley. Her legacy is one of stubborn defiance. She refused to be told what she couldn't do. She proved that courage was not about physical perfection, but about the strength of one's will. She was a founder of modern espionage, a pioneer whose methods were studied for generations. Sonia Purnell's biography rightly frames her as a woman of immense importance, a figure who shaped history. But even with a survivor, the questions remain. What was it like for her, one of the most celebrated field agents of the war, to transition to a life of bureaucracy and analysis at the CIA? Did she ever speak of the friends she lost, or did she, like so many of her generation, carry that grief in silence? And what secrets did she learn, not in the war, but in the long, quiet peace that followed? Secrets about her old allies and enemies that are still locked away in classified CIA archives. Her survival is a victory, but it is also a reminder that, for a spy, the war never truly ends.